So you finally found your dream 600 marketplace. I'm talking low kilometers, clean title, and only 5K. Easy deal, right? Not quite. Because the real cost of owning a bike like that doesn't stop once you hand over the cash, it starts right after. Let's find out how much these bikes actually run you once you factor in maintenance, fuel, insurance, and all the hidden stuff that no one ever tells you about. So for this breakdown, we'll be focusing on 2010s, which is what most riders actually ride. It's modern enough for fuel injection, traction control, and all that, but it's just affordable enough on the used market. So don't worry if you're planning on buying something a little bit older, the cost stay roughly the same. So we'll be comparing the Yamaha R6 to the Kawasaki ZX6R to the Suzuki Gixxer 600 to the Honda CBR 600RR. Now these are the big four's flagship models and what most riders actually ride. So we'll break down everything from purchase price to insurance to fuel costs and to maintenance. All right, so before we get into insurance or maintenance, let's talk about the big cost, which is obviously the purchase price. Okay, so to my right, I'll actually put up a graph that I made using CycleTrader. So these are the average used prices for these bikes from the years 2010 to 2019. So now take these numbers with a grain of salt because obviously it depends on where you live, the mileage of the bike, the mods the bike has, and all that. But this is a solid baseline for us to follow, and it's relatively close to what we'll see online. So according to the data, the R6 sits at the top at around 11,200, which is obviously no surprise because Yamaha did stop producing them and the price actually skyrocketed. Surprisingly, they hold their value very well. The Kawasaki ZX6R averages around 8,700, which is right around the middle. The Gixxer 600 actually comes at the most affordable at $7,900. Next up is the Honda CBR 600RR, which sits at just under 10 grand at around 9.7K. So yeah, while prices do move around depending on the season and where you live, it's important to understand where each of these bikes stand regarding their price. If you find one that's way under these numbers, there's probably a reason why. Always check for crash history, salvage titles, maintenance history before jumping on a deal. So next up would be fuel. So obviously it isn't the biggest cost while owning a 600, but it is something that you have to keep in mind. During peak season, if you're riding a lot, it does add up quickly, and a lot of these bikes use premium gas, which is obviously not cheap either. So I did pull data from Fuely, which is a site that a lot of riders use. So the R6 averages around 35 miles per gallon or around 6.7 liters per 100 kilometers. The ZX6R sits at around 34 to 37 miles per gallon, which is roughly 6.5 to 7 liters per 100 kilometers. The Gixxer 600 is surprisingly the most fuel efficient. Many riders report around 42 miles per gallon or around 5.6 liters per 100 kilometers. And the CBR 600 averages right in the middle at around 39 miles per gallon or around 6 liters per 100 kilometers. So now let's put that into something that everyone actually cares about, real money. In Canada, premium gas sits at around $1.80 to $2.10 per liter, depending on where you live. That means that every 100 kilometers costs around $10 to $13 Canadian, or roughly $18 to $25 per full tank. In the US, where premium gas sits around 4.25 a gallon, you're looking at around 10 to 18 USD per tank, depending on how heavy your wrist is. So for most riders, that would work out to be 60 to 120 a month, or around 700 to 1,000 Canadian per riding season if you ride regularly from spring to fall. Of course, that's assuming that you commute or ride normally. Obviously, if you start doing track days or hit up the twisties, you will end up using a lot more fuel. So next up, let's talk about maintenance, starting with fluids. To keep it simple, I'll be stating all the numbers in USD, obviously depending on where you live, convert it accordingly. So fluids are obviously really important, whether it's a car or a bike or any type of machine. You do need to keep an eye out on these type of things. So the main ones would be oil, brake fluid, coolant, and fork oil for a bike. Okay, so let's start with engine oil, which is one of the most important ones. Just for reference and to make it easier on you guys to read, I will be posting pages of the service manuals just to see visually what each bike requires. Okay, so it doesn't matter if you have an R6, CBR, a Gixxer, or even a ZX6R. A lot of these bikes require an oil change every 4,000 to 6,000 miles, around once a year. You'll need around 3 quarts of oil, a synthetic obviously, and an oil filter. If you do this yourself, it'll run you around $40 to $60 total. If you take it to a shop, will run you around 120 to 180 bucks. All right, so the next fluid would be coolant. Now this is something that is actually really important, but a lot of riders overlook. You should be flushing and replacing the coolant every 2 years, around 15,000 miles. If you do it yourself, it's pretty cheap, around 25 to 40 bucks. Take it to a shop, again, they're gonna charge you up the ass, 100 to 150 bucks. So the third fluid will be brake fluid. What a lot of riders don't understand is that brake fluid actually absorbs moisture over time. And obviously you do not want any water in your brake lines where it causes your brakes to be spongy and kills braking performance. So the service manual calls for a flush every 2 years or every year if you ride extremely hard. It's a really cheap thing to do, so do not skimp out on this. If you do it yourself, it'll cost you around 8 bucks to around 12 bucks. If you take it to a shop, obviously 80 to 120. All right, so the final fluid will be fork oil. Now this is a fluid that no one actually ever talks about, but it's huge for ride quality. So fork oil actually breaks down around 12,000 to 18,000 miles, and once that happens, your ride quality goes to shit. A full fork service costs around 150 to 250 bucks if you DIY. Take it to a shop, it's gonna be around double that, sitting around 350 to 500 bucks. So yeah, fluids obviously aren't the most glamorous thing, but they're the cheapest insurance that you can get for your bike. You stay on top of them, such as coolant, oil, brake fluid, and fork oil. I promise you, it'll save you thousands down the line. So next up, we'll talk about the drive system. This includes everything that puts the power from the engine to the back wheel. This includes chain, sprockets, and the clutch. So let's talk about the chain first. So every single manual you read will require the chain to be cleaned, lubed, and inspected every 600 miles or every couple of rides. If you end up neglecting this maintenance, the chain can actually stretch, seize, or snap. And I don't know about you guys, but I like my legs. A good O-ring or X-ring chain will last around 15 to 20,000 miles. If you end up replacing yourself, it'll run you 120 to 200 bucks. Or if you get done from a shop, it'll again be double that at around 3 to 400 bucks. So next up, after the chain, let's talk about the sprocket. So the chain and sprocket actually work together, which means that they wear together too. So once you replace one, you have to replace the other. So most riders actually do a full swap at around 15 to 20,000 miles. A decent steel set would cost you around 2 to 300 bucks, or around 4 to 500 bucks installed. Aluminum sprockets do look cool and they might save weight, but they do wear a lot faster. Stick with steel. Okay, so let's talk about the clutch now. So this one depends entirely on you as a rider. Obviously, 600cc bikes make all their power up top, so slipping the clutch is a common thing. Under normal riding, a clutch pack would probably last you around 30 to 50,000 miles. But again, if you're launching or popping wheelies, it will last you a lot less time. So a replacement clutch kit costs around 150 to 300 bucks. If you get installed at a shop, you're looking at around 3 to 500 bucks total, including labor. So all in all, the drive system actually isn't too expensive of a cost, but it does add up. Just stay on top of your maintenance and adjustments. It's one of those things where a little maintenance goes a long way. So let's talk about engine health now, which is a lot of stuff that most riders ignore until something goes wrong. So the 600s, like the ones behind me right now, are super precise machines. There's a reason that the manual calls for service to be done at very specific intervals. Specifically, I'm talking about valve clearances, spark plugs, air filters, and the actual fuel system itself. All right, so now let's talk about valve clearances, which is obviously one of the biggest maintenance things you can get done to your bike and is often overlooked. Again, to my right, I'll take pages from the service manuals so that you guys can see exactly when the bike does require maintenance. So on the R6, the valve adjustments are due every 24,000 miles. The ZX6R needs them around 15,000 miles. And both the Gixxer 600 and the CVR are roughly in the 16 to 24,000 mile range. So if your valves go out of spec, the engine can misfire, lose compression, or even burn a valve, which are all really expensive fixes. So a valve check at a shop will run you around 5 to 800 bucks. If the valves actually need to be adjusted, add another 400 or 500 bucks to that. So you're looking at around $900 to $1,200 total. It is a super labor intensive job. You can do it yourself, but again, it's a full day job and it is not for beginners. So the next thing after valves will be spark plugs. A lot of the service schedules call for replacements every 7,500 miles to 12,000 miles, depending on the plug type. Iridium plugs obviously last longer and are worth it. 4 plugs will run you around 40 to 60 bucks, but a shop will end up charging you around 150 to 250 bucks to get them replaced. So after spark plugs, we can talk about air filters. They should be checked every 6,000 miles and replaced after every 18,000 miles. Cost-wise, you're looking at around 30 to 50 bucks for OEM, or if you can even buy a reusable K&N one for around 70 bucks. Just make sure you clean it after each season. Okay, so far we've covered spark plugs, valves, and the air filter. Next, we can talk about the fuel system itself. Now, this is obviously a rare job. Usually doesn't need work done to it, but sometimes shit can go wrong, and obviously you want to be prepared for that. So if your fuel pump goes bad, you're looking at around $200 to $400 in parts, and then 400 to 500 bucks to get it installed at a shop. It's a relatively easy job, but again, if you're a beginner, it is kind of tough. So as you can see, maintaining a 600cc engine is not cheap, but there's a reason people love riding it. It's just fun. So over a few seasons, you'll probably end up paying around $1,000, $2,000 to stay on top of engine maintenance. If you skip it, I promise you, you will pay more for a rebuild. There's a reason people love 600s. They may not be cheap, but they're fun as shit to ride. So next up is the part that actually touches the road, which is your chassis and suspension. So this is everything that keeps your bike planted on the ground. So this includes tires, brakes, suspension, and bearings. All right, so let's talk about tires first, which are often the most common and underestimated cost of a bike. So the thing about sports tires is that they don't last long at all. A lot of riders report around 47,000 miles of use from each tire, depending on how aggressive they ride and the compound they actually use. So you can actually get super sticky tires, but good luck getting a lot of use out them. Me personally, for all my 600s, I use Pilot 2 CTs, which are I think the best bang for your buck, honestly. So a full set costs around 350 to 500 bucks to get them installed at a shop. If you decide to do it yourself, which is a pain in the ass, they will run you around 250 to 350 bucks. All right, so on to brakes now. As you guys know, 90% of your stopping power comes from front brakes, and the last 10% from the rear. Expect to replace your front pads around every 10 to 12,000 miles, and your rear pads every 15,000 miles. So a good set of front pads will cost you around 60 to 80 bucks. The rear one's 40 to 70. If you get a shop to install it, you're looking at 150 to 250 bucks in total. So rotors actually last a lot longer than brakes. You're looking at about 30 to 40,000 miles of use out of them. When you do get them replaced, they will set you back around 2 to 300 bucks. So next time we can talk about suspension. So I already covered the fork oil, but I will be talking about an actual fork rebuild. So again, that'll run you 3 to 500 bucks to get it done from the shop. All right, so next we can move on to bearings. So steering head and wheel bearings actually get checked every 24,000 miles, and you're looking at around $100 to $200 in parts beat it yourself, and 3 to 400 if you get it done from a shop. So yeah, your chassis obviously isn't cheap, but this is the maintenance that keeps your bike feeling light and safe. Expect to spend around 500 bucks to $1,000 per season if you do ride regularly. So let's wrap up the wrenching side of things and actually move on to the electrical system. So this is the part that everyone forgets about until your bike doesn't start. The big things here are your battery, sensors, and the actual charging system itself. All right, so let's move on to the battery now. So most 600s actually use an AGM or lithium battery because they're small and compact. But the thing about these batteries is that they don't like sitting for a while. If you do end up leaving the battery sitting for a while without a battery tender on, the battery can completely discharge and it becomes useless. Expect to replace your battery every 3 to 5 years, depending on charging habits and storage. So quality AGM batteries are actually cheaper than lithium batteries. You're looking at around 80 to 120 bucks for a good quality AGM. Lithium, you're looking at around 150 to 200. Now, obviously, the process of actually changing the battery itself is very easy. It takes about 5 minutes, 2 screws. But if you do get a shop to do it, expect to pay around 40 to 60 bucks extra in labor. So after the battery, we can move on to the charging system. So this includes your stator, regulator, rectifier, and all the wiring that keeps your battery actually charged. So regarding the charging system, there's no actual replacement schedule. You just inspect and test voltage every single riding season. A healthy system should keep the battery topped out at around 13.5 volts to around 14.5 volts. If your stator or your regulator actually fails, you'll know quickly. Your bike will either slow crank or it might die mid-ride. Replacing either will cost you around 150 to 300 bucks if you do it yourself, or 3 to 500 bucks of labor. So after the charging system, we can talk about bulbs and sensors. Bulbs and sensors are a minor thing, but they are definitely worth noting. So LED conversions for headlights usually cost around 40 to 100 bucks, and for turn signals, you're looking at around anywhere from 20 to 60 bucks. So common sensor failures such as a crank position sensor or a tip over sensor will run you around 50 to 150 bucks. If you install it yourself, with a shop, you're looking at around 2 to 300 bucks. So overall, electrical maintenance is definitely one of those low cost but high paying categories. You obviously want to keep up to date on the maintenance. So that means keep your bike on a tender, make sure you clean the terminals and and check the voltages once in a while. Ignore it, and I promise you, the one day that you want to go on a ride, that will be the day your electrical system fails. So now we can move on to insurance rates. Just full disclosure, all the rates that I will be showing are just a ballpark, taken with a grain of salt again. It's just to give you a decent idea of what you can expect to pay for a 600cc motorcycle. Here's how I arrived at these numbers right here. So I actually looked up the average premiums across many bike types, specifically standard bikes, which are around 3 to 500 bucks for the year. Then I applied upward multipliers for the supersport classification, which many insurers use for the 600cc sports bike. I also surveyed rider forms and insurance forms just to see what people actually paid for bikes like the R6, the ZX6R, the Gixxer, and the CBR. Finally, I averaged across conservative and aggressive rider profiles, such as age, location, claims history to get a realistic range. So let's take these as educated estimates, not a guaranteed number. So using that approach, these are some of the realistic full coverage ranges for riders in their 20s with clean records. Obviously, your numbers will vary. It will go higher or lower depending on where you live in your riding history itself. So the R6, you're looking at around 2,000 to 2,500 per year. ZX6R, you're looking at 16 to 2,200 per year. CBR, 1,500 to 2 grand per year. And the Gixxer, you're looking at 12 to 1,800 bucks per year. So these ranges actually include sports bike premiums and real world rider quotes. So obviously there is a reason why these rates are so high. Super sports like these are actually classified as high risk by insurers. They do have a higher incidence of crashes and thefts, higher repair costs, obviously, because they are super sport bikes. And lastly, younger riders are often the ones that are riding these type of bikes. So you could definitely cut your rate if you are in your 30s with like a clean driving record, you live in a low risk zip code, or you bundle your policies together, or you take safety courses like the MSF. So obviously I can spit numbers at you guys all day. They don't mean much until you actually go to the insurance place yourself and get a actual quote. Another recommendation I would have would be to definitely shop around. You do have places like Progressive, Geico, and other local ones. So definitely shop around and make sure you can get the best rate possible. At the end of the day, insurance costs are just something that are reoccurring and will always be one of your top costs for owning a bike like this. Okay, so let's move on because you did cover everything when it comes to the cost of owning a super sport bike. Let's put it all together now. Between regular servicing, small repairs, insurance, and all that sort, most riders do end up paying around $3,000 to $5,000 per year for owning a 600cc super sport. More if you actually give their bike to a shop. It's not a cheap hobby by any means, but for most riders, it is worth every single dollar. It is a big commitment to own one of these bikes, but obviously that's the cost of riding something that's super fun. All right, so if this video helped you guys understand what it truly costs to own one of these bikes behind me, please do like and subscribe. I will be focusing on a video on 1000s next or sometime in the future. That's something you definitely don't want to miss. Catch you guys in the next one. Take it easy.